Welcome to Instant Deck Techs. The aim of this series is to give you a short, concise guide on how to build a certain deck. It won't cover every card, but we'll go through all the categories and go over the types of cards needed to make the deck work. Any card mentioned will be down in the description below. The commander of this deck is Sythis, Harvest's Hand. It is green and a white for a 1/2 legendary enchantment creature nymph. It has, whenever you cast an enchantment spell, you gain 1 life and draw a card. This is going to be an enchantment matters deck. Having card draw built on a commander is very strong, and we'll be wanting to make the most of that. Where possible, as many effects in the deck will be on enchantments, or cards that care about them. As Sythis also gains us some life when we cast enchantments, there will be a slight life gain subtheme in the deck as well. Let's start off with our card draw. While we already have some of this on Sythis, more is always more, so we're going to be playing as many Enchantress effects as we can. Getting a couple of these out and then continuing to play enchantments will draw us a load of cards throughout the game. So as such, these are some of the most important cards to include. On top of these are cards like Abundant Growth, Sylvan Library and Calix, which are either enchantments that draw cards or help us draw enchantments. These are all things that the deck wants to be doing. There is also Dawn of Hope, which with our commander out will allow us to pay 2 every time we cast an enchantment to draw an additional card. The Token Maker ability will also come in handy later on as well. In a similar vein, we also have Court of Grace. The tokens will be really helpful in letting us win the game, and adding the monarchy to a game is always something I'm a fan of. Moving on to ramp, I'm going to recommend slightly more than a normal deck, up into the 10 to 12 range. As our commander is a card draw engine, we want to be playing as many cards as possible. To do this, we need mana. Lots of mana. First up in ramp is Wild Growth effects. These are importantly enchantments that can add to the amount of mana a land can produce, so they ramp us ahead and with our commander out, also draw us cards. After those, I'd firstly look at Arbor Elf, as it can untap a land with one of the previous effects, netting us extra mana, and then Sanctum Weaver could really get out of hand in this deck, and tap for a ton of mana with any kind of board state. If you think your meta is going to be packing a wide selection of enchantment removal, then you can look to more classic Rampant Growth effects. Having a bit of diversity means you're never completely ruined if someone casts Merciless Eviction. Still on the ramp section, and we're going to mention Exploration and Burgeoning. These are really good in the deck if you have them. They can come out early, ramp us ahead, and with the card draw from our commander, should continue to do work throughout the game. To really kick things up a notch, we can run some mana doublers, with things like Mirari's Wake and Zendikar Resurgent, giving us plenty of mana to push us into the late game. And lastly, we have Growing Rights of Itlamok. There will be some token makers in this deck, so flipping this into a Guy's Cradle will be extremely good and very easy. Moving on to interaction, we can start with some enchantments that get rid of threats. What they lack by being sorcery speed, they make up for in this deck by having card draw tacked onto them with our commander out. Song of the Dryads is sneaky good at turning off someone's commander. That doesn't mean, however, you can ignore instant speed interaction, especially if your meta is more combo orientated. Run something like Path to Exile or Beast Within as well, just to be safe. For some more enchantment-based removal, we have things like Aura of Silence and the always excellent Aura Shards. We should have no issue keeping our opponent's enchantments and artifacts in check. And then obviously as we're in white, we can run some board wipes for when things get away from us. I put Protection and Recursion together in this deck as they're doing very similar things. We're not so much fussed about our commander dying as we do have some redundancy in the other Enchantress effects. We're more worried about people picking off our key enchantments. So to stop this, we can either run some cards that either give our things protection or things that bring enchantments back from the graveyard either to our hand or to the battlefield. Because our commander triggers on casting enchantments, sometimes it's better to bring them back to your hand, so you can recast them again and draw some extra cards. Okay, so at some point after ramping and drawing all those cards, we need to think about winning the game. How we're going to do that in this deck is with token makers. On screen, here are the best ones available, as they make us tokens whenever we cast an enchantment, which as you may have noticed is a large portion of this deck. After those, we can look at Crested Sunmere and Trudge Garden. Remember, our commander gains us life whenever we cast an enchantment, as well as drawing a card, so the additional tokens that these can make will be really nice. Then the last part of our token makers are enchantments that make us tokens, again triggering card draw, moving our game plan forward. Some of the smaller tokens may look a little anemic, but we'll be running some ways of buffing them up. There's plenty of enchantments out there that make tokens, so look out for those, and I'd want to run between 8 and 12 of them in the deck. Talking of ways of buffing up those tokens, we're going to start with Beastmaster Ascension. This is effectively a Crater Hoof if you're swinging with 7 or more creatures, and is always a very solid way of winning the game. Then there are more traditional Anthem effects. I put my favourite on screen here, with Crescendo of War, Dictate of Heliod, and Collective Blessing, but there are plenty more out there that you can look into. Then we have creatures, which can make our creatures grow whenever we trigger our commander. Lathiel from the lifegain, and Celestial Ancient from whenever we cast an enchantment. Moving on to some more combo-oriented ways of winning the game, Heliod Suncrowned will be very good in the deck anyway, and if you're playing that, then you can throw in a Walking Ballista to ping all of your opponents to death. In a similar vein, Archangel of Thune will be very good in the deck. As with this out and our commander, whenever we cast an enchantment, it'll put a +1/+1 counter on all of our creatures. And then if you're playing that, you can also run Spike Feeder to gain infinite life. Links to how these combos work will be down in the description below. One thing you can do with infinite life is shoot everyone else in the face with an Aetherflux Reservoir. However, even without this combo, we'll still be gaining a ton of life in this deck, so it's still a very attainable win condition, so it is something to consider. Moving on, Destiny Spinner does double up as some protection, but it can turn a land or two into a huge beater to smash face with. And talking of turning things into beaters to smash face, Starfield Nyx turns all of our enchantments into creatures. This is possibly a double-edged sword, but could be what's needed to push a game over the edge. And then rounding off the deck with some utility lands, Hall of Helios Generosity is one of the best lands for an enchantment deck that's not £1 million. And then after that we can run some additional creature buff with Gavony Township, some card draw with War Room, and then some ways of interacting with our opponents with Ghost Quarter and Scavenger Grounds. The rest of your mana base will be very dependent on what you have available to you. We've recently released a video with some advice on building a deck with a budget mana base, which might be of help. Until next time, please like, share and subscribe, and let us know down in the comments if there are any commanders you'd like to see a deck tech on. Thank you very much for watching.